On Christmas Eve, my brother knocked my coffee out of my hand after I refused to let his family take over my paid-off guest house. "You're a selfish little parasite," he snapped. And my dad added, "Don't come back to this family again." I just smiled, stood up, and walked to my car. By 7:10 a.m., he reached for the door and stopped at the white notice taped over the lock. The mug was warm in both hands. Mom painted the sunflower herself, freehand, the summer before the diagnosis. 3 petals a little too long, the stem slightly crooked where her wrist shook. I had been carrying it to every holiday dinner for 3 years, wrapping my fingers around the curve where the brushstroke started. 14 people at my father's table. Paper plates because nobody wanted to wash the china. Todd sat across from me with Megan and both girls, the 4-year-old on Megan's lap and the 7-year-old next to him, bouncing his knee the way he did when he had an announcement he expected nobody to question. He had been doing that since we were teenagers. The bounce, the throat clear, the lean forward. It always meant the same thing. Something was about to be decided, and he had already decided it. I kept coming to Clifton's house for holidays because Mom asked me to, the November before she died. "Keep the table full, Leona." I kept it full for 3 years. I should have stopped after the first Christmas without her. I know that. The ham was carved. Bea had brought her cornbread. The 7-year-old was drawing a candy cane on a napkin, and the 4-year-old was asleep against Megan's shoulder. Clifton sat at the head of the table with his hands folded like a man who already knew what was about to be said and had approved of it in advance. Todd cleared his throat and looked at me. "So Megan and I have been talking, and we think it makes the most sense for us to move into the house after New Year's." He said it the way he said everything, like the decision was already behind him and the rest of us just needed to catch up. Megan smiled and rubbed the 4-year-old's back. Clifton nodded once, slowly, like a man approving a loan he had already signed. Nobody at the table looked surprised, which meant they had discussed this before tonight, and nobody had asked me. I set the sunflower mug on the table. "That house is mine. I paid it off. Nobody is moving in." Bea's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Todd's knee stopped bouncing. Nobody at that table expected me to say no, because I had never said no to anything in that family. Not when Clifton asked me to cover Todd's car insurance for 6 months. Not when Todd borrowed my truck and returned it with a dent and an apology that came 3 weeks late. Not when they asked me to host Thanksgiving alone the year Mom died because Clifton said he could not be in a house that smelled like her cooking. I said yes to all of it. Every time. "Leona, come on, the girls need space. You have 3 bedrooms and you sleep in 1. You do not even use the back patio. It is my house, Todd." Megan shifted in her seat and glanced at Clifton, looking for backup. Clifton unfolded his hands and tapped one finger against the table. "Your brother has a family, Leona. You are one person. Your mother would have wanted the girls to have a yard. Mom left that house to me. She wanted me to have it. That is why she put my name on it. She put your name on it because you were single and you needed help." Clifton said this like he was correcting a misunderstanding about a parking spot, not my mother's last decision about her own property. She would have done the same for Todd if Todd had been alone. That is not true, and you know it. "Leona," he said my name the way he said it when I was 12 and I talked back at the dinner table. A warning wrapped in 2 syllables. "We are not asking for the deed. We are asking you to let your brother's family use the extra space while you figure out your situation. My situation is fine. My house is paid off. My job is stable. There is nothing to figure out." Todd leaned forward. "Then what are you doing with 3 bedrooms? Storing boxes? Keeping one room as a shrine? Because that is what it looks like from where I am sitting." The cousin at the end of the table shifted in his seat. The uncle next to Bea studied his water glass. This was the Clifton I had known my entire life, the man who could rewrite the past at a dinner table and expect everyone to nod along. And Todd was his echo. Mom did not leave me that house because I needed help. She left it to me because I was the one who drove her to treatment 3 times a week for 11 months, while Todd canceled twice and Clifton sat in this same chair and said he could not handle hospitals. Todd pushed his chair back and stood up. He was taller than me by 5 inches, and he used every one of them. The 7-year-old stopped drawing. The cornbread on B's plate went untouched. "You are 33 years old, Leona. No ring. No kids. You sit in a courtroom typing other people's problems 8 hours a day and come home to 3 empty bedrooms. My girls need a home. You are a selfish little parasite living in a dead woman's house." Nobody moved. B set her glass down so carefully the ice did not clink. The 4-year-old shifted against Megan's arm but did not wake up. Megan pressed her lips together and looked at the tablecloth, and I understood from the way she did not react, the way her shoulders did not tighten, that she had heard Todd rehearse some version of this speech in their apartment and had not stopped him. The cousin at the end of the table lowered his fork to his plate without finishing the bite. The uncle next to B pushed his chair 6 inches back from the table and rested his hands on his knees, the body language of a man preparing to leave a room he did not want to be in. I had heard worse in transcript. In 11 years behind the stenograph machine, I had typed words that made attorneys flinch, words that made jury members look at their shoes, words that made judges call a recess because the courtroom needed air. I typed all of it without changing my breathing, without shifting in my chair, without looking up. The record does not care if you are uncomfortable. The record only cares if you are accurate. But none of those transcripts had my mother's name in them. None of them called me a parasite at a Christmas table in front of children who were young enough to remember the words and old enough to repeat them. I almost stood up. My weight shifted forward in the chair, my palms pressed against the table edge. And for half a second I was going to say every single thing I had stored for 3 years. But the 7-year-old was watching her father with the crayon still in her hand, and I sat back. Whatever I said in that room, those girls would hear. Todd reached across the table and swatted the sunflower mug from my hand. Not a grab. A swat, open palm, the way you knock something off a counter when you are too angry to aim. The mug hit the patio stone outside the open sliding door and broke apart. A piece of the rim spun off the stone and caught the back of my left hand, leaving a thin red line across the knuckle. The handle separated with a sound like a branch snapping. Another piece spun on the concrete and stopped. Clifton looked at me. Not at the patio, not at the pieces, at me. "You heard your brother. Don't come back to this family again." B stood up from her chair. "Clifton, that is enough." He did not look at her. She sat back down slowly and pressed both palms flat on the table. I pushed my chair back, walked to the patio, 5 pieces on the stone. The biggest one was a curved section with half the sunflower still visible, the paint bright against the white ceramic. I picked up that piece, brushed the dust from the painted edge, and slid it into my coat pocket. Then I walked through the kitchen, past the dining room, past 14 people who watched me and said nothing, and I got in my car. I adjusted the mirror, checked the street, and pulled onto the road. Mom's house was 12 minutes from Clifton's place. I had not been there in almost 3 months. After she died, I could not be in that house without hearing her voice in every room, without seeing the kitchen counter where she set her coffee every morning, without smelling the lavender she planted by the front steps. So I let it sit empty and paid the utilities on autopay without checking the amounts. The mortgage was paid off, the insurance was current. I thought the house was safe because it was mine and because nobody had any reason to touch it. I drove there that night because after what Todd said, after what Clifton said, it was the only place that still felt like her. The first thing I noticed was a lockbox hanging from the front door handle, a gray plastic combination box bolted onto the handle with a cable loop. Nobody had asked my permission for that. The only spare key was in my desk at home, plus the one Clifton kept from when Mom was alive. Clifton had a spare key from when Mom was alive, a key she gave him for emergencies. That key, or a copy of it, was how this started. Someone used Clifton's spare to enter my house, install a lockbox, and open it to strangers for 8 months, while I drove past twice a week on my way to the courthouse and never stopped, because the grief was still sitting in every room. I parked at the curb and got out slowly. Through the front window I could see 2 people inside, a couple in their 40s, sitting on my couch with the TV on. The kitchen light was yellow. There was a suitcase near the door. I walked to the side window. Through the blinds I heard the woman say, "Todd said checkout is Christmas morning. Cute place. Found it on Stay Local." The man answered. "The listing says Clifton, but Todd was the one who met us, gave us the code for the lockbox. My own house. My paid-off house that I had spent 4 years making mortgage payments on, and 2 strangers were sitting on my couch because my brother put it on a rental platform under my father's name. That meant Clifton knew. The demand at dinner, the nodding, the backup. It was both of them working together, and the demand to move in was the next phase of a plan that had been running for 8 months without my knowledge. I went back to my car, opened Stay Local on my phone, and searched the address. 90 seconds. 3 bedrooms. Cozy family retreat. Clifton's name as host. 8 months of bookings. 47 reviews. Photos of rooms I had painted myself, the kitchen counter I had refinished the spring after Mom died. The listing had a calendar showing book dates stretching back to April. Everything from December 26th onward was blocked. He was not pausing the listing. He was shutting it down permanently because the house was about to become his. The listing showed roughly $1,800 a month in income based on the nightly rate and the booking calendar. 8 months. That was $14,400 in income from a house I owned. $14,400, and at Christmas dinner, Todd looked me in the eye and called me the Parasite. The 3rd review mentioned Todd by name. The owner's brother Todd met us at check-in, very friendly. Review 11 said the place was clean but could use new towels. Review 17 mentioned a carpet stain in the 2nd bedroom, apologized for by the host's son. Review 31 complained about a loose closet door. Every review was a receipt. Every booking was a transaction, and none of them had my name anywhere. I screenshotted everything. 43 screenshots in 20 minutes. Every review, every photo on the listing, the calendar, the host profile with Clifton's name and photo. 11 years of watching attorneys build evidence packages had taught me exactly what survived a challenge and what got thrown out. Dates, timestamps, exact amounts, third-party records. My phone buzzed. A text from Todd sent to the family group chat at 9:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, 40 minutes after he shattered my mother's mug and my father told me to leave. The message read, "Moving day is the 27th. Could use help carrying the big stuff if anyone is free. Megan is making chili." A smiley face. 11 people in the group chat and not one had replied, but he sent it anyway, because in Todd's version of tonight I had already surrendered and the house was his. If you have ever watched someone slowly realize they have been stolen from, not by a stranger but by the people who were supposed to love them, then you know what this channel is about. Subscribe to Family Secret Tales if you want to hear what happened next, because it got worse before it got better. At home, I filed an unauthorized listing report on Stay Local. The form asked for the property address, proof of ownership, and a description of the issue. I uploaded my deed and wrote 3 sentences explaining that the property was listed without my knowledge or consent. The response was automated. A form letter thanking me for my report. To remove a listing flagged as unauthorized, the property owner must upload recorded deed, utility bills in the owner's name for 6 months, and a notarized sworn statement affirming that no authorization was given. Estimated resolution, 5 to 7 business days. During the review period, the listing would remain active and existing bookings would not be canceled. 5 to 7 days. The platform treated my report the same way it treated any dispute, slowly, methodically, with no way to escalate. Todd planned to move in December 27th. The platform would not resolve anything in time. I called Serena at 11 that night. Serena spent every Christmas alone since her divorce 3 years ago. She was still awake. Remember the Whitmore trespass case last March? The sister who listed her brother's cabin without telling him? Judge Harlan. I processed the filing. He needed 3 things: deed, utilities in the owner's name, and a sworn statement of no authorization. She paused. Why are you asking me this on Christmas Eve? Because my brother listed Mom's house on Stay Local 8 months ago under Clifton's name, and I just found out tonight. There are guests inside right now. 3 seconds of silence. Then, I am coming over. She showed up 40 minutes later with 2 paper cups of gas station coffee. Black, too hot. She set mine on the kitchen table, pulled a chair around to my side, and read the reviews on my laptop without saying a word. She scrolled through the screenshots, checked the calendar, and counted the reviews. How long has the listing been active? 8 months. I have not been to that house since September. The bills were on autopay. I never checked the amounts. That is not a favor gone wrong, Leona. That is a business. Someone has been running a business on your property and pocketing the income. She tapped the screen where Clifton's host profile appeared, and your father's name is on it, which means he knew from the beginning. He nodded at the table tonight. When Todd made the announcement, Clifton nodded like it was already decided. Because it was. Serena scrolled back through the reviews. Look at the dates. The first booking was April. 8 months of coordination. Someone set up the listing, took the photos, wrote the description, managed the calendar, met the guests, handled the lockbox. That is an operation. And your father was the face of it. She scrolled further. This review says Clifton responded to our message within an hour. That is your father answering booking requests on a platform. He was not just lending his name. He was active. She was right. Clifton had not stumbled into this. He had been a partner from the start, managing inquiries and collecting his share while I drove past that house twice a week on my way to the courthouse and assumed it was sitting empty because I could not bring myself to go inside. Then she said something I was not prepared for. There is something else. I saw Todd at the courthouse about 6 weeks ago. He was not there for a case. He was at the finance clerk's window. I asked around the next day. Somebody from his dealership filed a complaint. I pulled up the Better Business Bureau website. Todd's dealership had a public complaint filed against an unnamed employee for padding customer loan applications with inflated income figures. Filed 6 weeks ago. The dealership's response said the employee had been terminated. Todd was fired. The $1,800 a month from my house was his only income. His apartment rent was $2,200. Without his salary and without the rental money, he was drowning. The demand at Christmas dinner was not entitlement. It was a man with no job, no savings, and a landlord who would notice in 30 days. The rental scheme had been his safety net. And he needed the house itself because the net was not going to hold. "What are you going to do?" Serena asked. "The guests check out tomorrow morning. Todd plans to move in the 27th. I have a 2-day window. That is not a lot of time. It is enough. I opened a blank document on my laptop. I have typed what I am about to type 1,000 times for other people. Same format, same language, same margins. The only difference is the name." Serena watched me type. She had seen me work at the courthouse 100 times, fingers moving at the same speed, whether the case was a parking dispute or a custody hearing. There was no anger in my hands, no tremor, just the steady rhythm of fingers on keys. This was work. Notice of trespass. Property address. Owner, Leona. Persons notified, Todd Clifton. You are hereby notified that you are not authorized to enter, occupy, or permit any third party to enter or occupy the above described property. I typed the county name. the statute number, the effective date. Sitting in my own kitchen, typing my brother's name into a field I had filled with strangers' names 1,000 times, the words felt different. They felt like they belonged to me for the first time. Serena read it over my shoulder. That is tighter than half the filings we process. I printed 2 copies. Then I added a line in my own handwriting at the bottom, the date I bought the house, the date I made the final mortgage payment, and the amount, $847. I wanted Todd to read that number when he reached for the door. Christmas morning. The guests checked out by 10, loaded their car from the lockbox key, and drove away. I watched from across the street. Then I walked through my house for the first time in 3 months. It smelled different. Not bad, but different. Like laundry detergent I did not buy, and air freshener I would never choose. The carpet in the second bedroom had a brown stain the size of a dinner plate. The sliding closet track was cracked and hanging off the rail. The kitchen countertop had 3 deep scratches from something heavy being dragged across it. That countertop was the last project I finished in this house when the grief was still fresh. 2 weekends of sanding by hand because the orbital sander left marks, and I wanted the grain to show exactly the way it showed when Mom set her coffee down every morning. Now it had gouges from a stranger's luggage. There was a guest book on the entryway table, a spiral notebook with welcome. On the cover in someone's handwriting that was not mine, inside 20 or 30 entries. Lovely stay. Todd was so helpful. We will definitely come back. These people had slept in my beds, cooked in my kitchen, and walked on the floors I paid for, and every one of them thought they were renting from a man named Clifton who owned the place. Fresh towels I never bought were folded in thirds in the linen closet. A basket of sample soaps sat on the bathroom counter. Someone had been managing this house like a business for 8 months while I paid the mortgage, the water, the electric, and the insurance without looking at the numbers. I stood at the kitchen counter and photographed every page of the guest book, making sure the timestamp was visible on each shot. The physical book was leverage. The photos were the permanent record. Then I photographed the damage. 22 photos, time-stamped, total estimated damage, $2,800. I almost called Clifton that afternoon. His number was on my screen, my thumb near the button, and I stopped because I did not want to hear him use Mom's name to explain why renting out her house behind my back was somehow an act of family love. What I wanted was the notice on the door and the letters in the mail. Documents, not conversation. 11 years behind a stenograph machine had taught me that the thing said in a room disappears. The thing written on paper stays. The morning of December 26th, I was waiting when Pratt's office opened at 8:30. He read the screenshots, the guest book photos, and the trespass notice I had already written. He looked at the evidence for a long time. The stay local payments go to the verified host, he said. That is your father's account. He received the full amount and distributed it. The listing reviews mention Todd by name. 2 of them call him the host's brother. He was collecting cash from guests and managing the property. Pratt pulled up the platform's payment FAQ on his screen. The host receives the platform payout. If Clifton received $14,400 over 8 months and kept a portion, the rest went to Todd in cash or transfers. He made a note. I will draft 2 demand letters. Todd for $10,800, the amount he received, plus $2,800 in property damages. Total, $13,600. Clifton for $3,600, his cut. Both certified mail. How do you know the split? I do not. But the platform paid Clifton. Whatever he did not keep, he gave to Todd. If they dispute the split, they can show their records. Either way, the total is $14,400 plus $2,800 in damages. He notarized my trespass notice. Stamped, signed, dated, the demand letters would go out that afternoon. Before I left, he asked me one more question. Your brother committed battery on Christmas Eve. A piece of the mug cut your hand. Do you have photographs? The cut is still visible. I have not washed the coat. File a police report today. Take the coat, show them the hand. I told him I had already planned to. He nodded and wrote the police station's address on a sticky note. Even though I had typed that address into 100 court documents and could recite it from memory. Lawyers are careful people. So are court reporters. That evening, I drove to the house. The street was quiet, the kind of late December quiet where every house has its lights on but nobody is outside. I taped the trespass notice to the front door with white painter's tape centered over the lock. The handwritten line at the bottom, with the payoff date and the $847, faced outward. I pressed the tape flat with both thumbs, the same way I would prepare a filing for the clerk's window. Every corner aligned, every word visible. Then I removed the lockbox from the door handle, put it in my trunk, and called a locksmith. He came within the hour and rekeyed both doors while I sat on the porch steps and watched the street. New keys. My keys. Nobody else's. If you are still listening, you already know what is coming. If stories like this keep you coming back, make sure you are subscribed to Family Secret Tales, because this next part is the reason I am telling you all of it. The morning of December 27th, Todd's truck turned onto the block at 7:10. Megan was in the passenger seat holding a cardboard box with the top open, a blender, a stack of plates, a roll of shelf liner. She was smiling. Through the windshield, I could see her talking, her lips moving, planning the kitchen and the bedrooms and the yard where the girls would play. She had no idea what was on that door. She had no idea that the man driving her to their new home had lied to her face that morning about Leona calling and apologizing. Todd out first. Todd got out first. He was wearing moving day clothes, flannel and jeans, and he walked to the front door with his keys already in his hand. His hand reached for the lock. He stopped. White paper, taped flat, centered over the handle. He leaned in and read the first line. His hand dropped. He tried his key. The lock did not turn. He tried it again, harder, jiggling it the way people do when they cannot accept that the key no longer fits. Then he stepped back from the door and stood there with his keys in one hand and his phone in the other, reading the notice from the beginning, line by line, the way defendants read court documents when they realize the paper knows more than they wanted anyone to find out. Megan opened her door. "Todd? What is that?" I stepped out of my car across the street, closed the door quietly, crossed the street and walked up the driveway. Todd watched me come. His jaw tightened, but his feet did not move. Listing my property on Stay Local without my knowledge is unauthorized use. Collecting rental income from a house you do not own is theft of services. The listing has Clifton's name as host. 47 reviews over 8 months. 2 of them mention you by name. You cannot do this. Todd's voice was tight. Dad said it was fine. Clifton does not own this house. He was never on the deed. He was never on the mortgage. He received every dollar from Stay Local and passed your share to you in cash. That makes both of you liable. Megan set the box on the porch railing and turned. "What is she talking about, Todd? You told me she called yesterday and said it was fine. You said she apologized." Todd kept his eyes on me. "Megan, not now. You told me she agreed. You looked me in the eye this morning and said Leona called you and apologized." Todd did not answer that. Megan took a step back from him, and something in her face changed. Not surprise. Recognition, the expression of a woman who was realizing that the lie she just caught was not the first one, and probably not the worst one. 47 reviews. I kept my voice level. 8 months. You want to tell her it was a few weekends, or should I pull up the listing on my phone? Todd turned to Megan. "It was temporary. I was going to tell you." "For 8 months?" Megan's hand went to her hip. "Todd, look at me. Were you renting out her house? It is more complicated than that." "Were you fired, Todd?" Her voice dropped. "Because I called the dealership last week about your schedule, and the receptionist said you had not worked there since November." Todd's head snapped toward her. Megan, not here. You told me the dealership was restructuring. You told me you switched to remote training. It has been 6 weeks. She unfolded her arms. She looked at the trespass notice, then at the box on the railing, then at the truck in the driveway, and I watched her connect what I had connected 48 hours earlier. No salary, no rental income. The house was not a gift for the girls. It was the only plan Todd had left. Todd turned back to me. This is my family, Leona, my daughters. They need a roof. They have a roof. You have an apartment. What you do not have is the right to take my house because you lost your job and ran out of other people's money. A car pulled up behind Todd's truck, Bee's station wagon. She had been at Clifton's house that morning when Todd loaded his truck. She remembered what Todd announced at Christmas dinner, and she worried about what would happen when he showed up at a house Leona had already refused to give him. She got out slowly, walked to the sidewalk, and stood with her arms at her sides. I almost let it be enough. The silence was working. But he was still standing on my porch, still reaching for the handle of a house that was never his. You broke Mom's mug, rented her house for 8 months, and called me the parasite. The notice on that door has your name on it, not mine. 24 words. Flat delivery. The same tone I used when I read back testimony in court, and the attorneys leaned forward because the transcript was doing their job for them. Megan walked down the porch steps. She stood next to Bea on the sidewalk. The distance between her and Todd was more than 12 feet of concrete. It was the space between what she thought her marriage was and what it turned out to be. Todd pulled out his phone. Leona, please, take the notice down. I will pay you back every month from my next job. I promise. Just let me move in until I get back on my feet. I reached through the open car window and picked up the manila folder from the passenger seat, handed it to him. Inside, printed screenshots of every review, guest book photographs, a month-by-month income spreadsheet, and 2 photographs of the carpet stain and the scratched countertop. 31 pages. I said nothing. Todd opened the folder, turned 3 pages and stopped. His car keys slipped from his left hand and hit the porch step with a bright metal sound. He looked down at the keys instead of at me, as if they had done something he was not prepared for. His shoulders pulled inward, slow, the posture of a man bracing against a wind nobody else could feel. He blinked 5 or 6 times without speaking, his mouth partly open, and for the first time since I had known my brother as an adult, he looked exactly the way defendants look in a courtroom when the transcript is read back and they realize every word is on the record. This is a formal trespass notice. You are not welcome on this property. Not as a guest, not as family. Todd stood on the porch for another 10 seconds. The folder hung from one hand. Then he stepped off the porch, walked past Megan without speaking, and got in his truck. The box of kitchen things sat on the tailgate. He did not take it. Megan got in the passenger side without looking at him. They pulled out of the driveway in silence. No argument, no shouting. Just the sound of a truck engine and Megan's hand reaching across the console to turn off the radio. Bea watched them go. She stood on the sidewalk for another moment, then walked to me. She put one hand on my arm. Your mother would have done the same thing, she said quietly, except she would have posted it on the back door too. She squeezed my arm once, let go, got in her station wagon, and drove home. 2 days after Christmas, Bea called Clifton. Your name is on a rental listing for your daughter's property, Clifton. 47 strangers slept in Claire's house and you collected a cut every month to make it happen. Bea, it was not like that. Todd needed help. He lost his job and I was trying to keep things together. You were keeping things together by renting Claire's house behind your own daughter's back for 8 months and taking money for it. It was not that much. It was enough to keep doing it for 8 months. It was enough to tell Leona she was not welcome in your family when she said no. You told your daughter she was not welcome at the same table where Claire served Thanksgiving for 22 years. He was quiet. B told me later he did not speak for almost 10 seconds. Claire would not have spoken to you again. You know that. I know that. Do not call me until you have paid every cent back. She called 3 more family members that afternoon. The uncle who had pushed his chair back from the table on Christmas Eve. The cousin who had stared at his plate. A second cousin in the next town who had always been closer to Mom than to Clifton. By New Year's Day, Clifton had not received a single invitation to any gathering. His own sister stopped setting a place for him at Sunday lunch. He sat in the house where Claire's china was still in the cabinet, at the table where he told me never to come back, and he ate alone. Todd's rent came due January 1st. Without his salary and without the rental income, he could not cover it. His landlord sent a 3-day notice on January 4th. Clifton could not help. He had already spent every dollar of his cut. Megan packed 2 suitcases on December 29th. She packed the 7-year-old's drawing pad and the 4-year-old's stuffed rabbit. She took the girls to her mother's house. At the door she stopped and looked at Todd, who was sitting on the couch watching her carry luggage past him for the 3rd time. You called your sister a parasite, she said, but you are the one who fed off her to keep us afloat. Do not call my mother's house. She left before lunch. Pratt's demand letter arrived at Clifton's house on January 2nd. Certified mail. $3,600 demanded, separate from Todd's amount. Clifton opened it at the same kitchen table where he had told me to leave. He paid in January to avoid a lawsuit. He mailed the check without a note. Todd's letter arrived January 3rd. $13,600. He did not respond. Pratt told me filing a civil suit against a man with no income was a slow play, but I told him to draft the paperwork anyway. I want a judgment on the record, I said. The moment he gets a paycheck, it starts getting garnished. The rental platform removed the listing on January 1st, 7 days after my documentation cleared review. The confirmation email to Clifton's suspended account used a word he had never had directed at him in 61 years, unauthorized. I filed a police report for battery on December 26th, the same morning I met Pratt. The officer at the counter asked me to describe the incident. I described it the way I would describe it in a transcript. Who was present, what was said, what was done, in what order. He asked if there were injuries. I showed him the back of my left hand, where the thin red line from the ceramic shard had scabbed over, but was still clearly visible. He photographed it. He wrote down the names of 4 witnesses who were at the table. The report was filed as misdemeanor battery. In February, Todd applied for a sales position at a competing dealership. The background check flagged the pending charge. He did not get the job. Megan called me once in early January. Her voice was steady and tired, the voice of a woman who had spent 2 weeks at her mother's kitchen table, piecing together every lie her husband had told in the last 6 months. I had no idea about the listing. I had no idea he lost his job. He told me he was helping Clifton with a real estate project on weekends. That is where he went every Sunday morning to turn over the house between guests. I believe you. Your lawyer sent me a notice about the civil case. Tell him I am not contesting anything. If he needs a statement confirming what Todd told me, I will sign it. That was the last conversation we had. Todd called once, January 2nd. I saw his name and let it ring. He did not leave a message. He did not text. He did not try again. B called every Sunday. She brought flowers to the house once, yellow daisies from the grocery store. She asked if I needed anything. I said no. She left them on the porch railing. The next Sunday she brought more. I stopped turning her away and started putting them in a glass on the kitchen table, in the spot where Mom used to set her coffee. If you made it this far, you are the reason I told this story. Family Secret Tales is where I share the things that happen when the people who are supposed to protect you decide to profit from you instead. Subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you in the next one. January Todd drove past the house once. B saw his truck slow at the end of the block and then keep going. The locks were new. The notice was gone from the door. There was nothing left for him to reach for. His resume sat open on his laptop in his apartment. Applications sent, none answered. The pending battery charge showed up on every background check. The demand sat in a stack of mail on his counter next to the 3-day notice and 2 credit card statements. He was 36, unemployed, separated, 45 days late on rent, and the civil judgment Pratt was filing would follow his name until the last dollar was paid. The house was 12 minutes away and he could not set foot on the property. Clifton paid the $36,600 in January. He had not spoken to me since Christmas Eve and showed no intention of starting. B told me he mentioned Mom's name once at a family birthday he was not invited to, saying I was twisting Claire's memory. B told the room what Clifton's name had been doing on a rental listing for 8 months and how much he took every month. Nobody mentioned it again. Nobody defended him. He sat in his house with Claire's china in the cabinet and her recipe cards in the drawer, and the silence of a man who had traded his daughter for a monthly cut of someone else's rent and come out with nothing on either side. Pratt held the civil suit paperwork. Serena still brought 2 coffees every Monday morning, set mine on my desk at 7:45, and said nothing about the case unless I brought it up first. She never asked how I felt. She never told me I was brave. She just brought the coffee and sat at her desk 8 feet away, and on the mornings when I was typing trespass filings for strangers, she let me type without looking up. She was the first person in years who understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is be in the room without making a sound. Inside the house, one morning in early January, I sat at the kitchen table with a plain white mug from the hardware store. No sunflower, no brushstroke, just a mug that was the right size and did not carry anything with it. The countertop had been refinished again, the scratches sanded out, the seal reapplied. The carpet in the second bedroom was clean. The closet track was fixed. The guest book was in a box in my closet. The lockbox was in my trunk. The locks were mine. On the windowsill above the sink, one curved shard caught the morning light, half a petal visible. The paint still bright, the glaze smooth where Mom's brush had started 3 summers ago. The shard was not glued to anything, not framed, just set on the windowsill the night everything changed, catching the light every morning the way it was catching it now. The house was quiet. The deed was mine. The table was the same one where Mom mixed the paint and held the brush with both hands because one was not steady enough, and smiled at the crooked stem and said it looked better that way. I drank my coffee. I set the plain mug down on the table and sat there for a while, in the quiet, in the light, in a house that belonged to me. Enscript Echo V2 written.